In this video, I'm going to make a clickbait title that kind of has some truth to it. How much do boxing coaches matter? Well, that's the big takeaway I had from Ryan Garcia against Mario Barrios. In this video, I'm going to explain or talk about as well as get through some of the undercard results. If that's interesting to you, stick around. Also, if you're new to the channel, it really help if you hit the subscribe button, leave a comment on some feedback. I've been seeing a lot of people want the audio engineering to be better, so let me know if I'm improving that, and also hit the thumbs up if you think I'm either a great guy or this is a great video. So watching Ryan Garcia against Mario Barrios, and I know I should say Garcia versus Barrios because I've already introduced him once, but we're breaking the rules. We're unconventional. This is like a punk rock boxing talk show, even though I'm middle-aged and there's nothing really edgy about me. There was one clear thing, right? There was like an athleticism gap. You saw Barrios, and he's the world champion, made 2 defenses via draws. People have been highly critical of him, but his win over Yordenis Ugas was very solid. So, you can criticize here and there, but he looks like an older fighter. He looks like a guy who's had wear and tear on him, and he looks, not quite in his athletic prime at this point. And then you see Ryan Garcia, and there's a huge speed advantage and athletic gifts, and this is arguably the best version we've ever seen. But it reminded me of an undercard fighter, too. Frank Martin fought Francis Barthélemy, and there was a lot of talk that Frank Martin really had made leaps and bounds changes since moving from Derek James to Buddy McGirt. Then we see him fighting a Herwu Albright. A really good movie, a professional spoiler, etc. And those changes didn't appear to be as big, right? If anything, maybe Martin lost some of his movement because he was being a little bit more aggressive, and that's fine. But I think sometimes we overrate the impact of a coach based on the opponent in front of them. Martin fought Francis Barthélemy. Francis Barthélemy was essentially a 40-year-old man, a former multi-division, I believe 2-division, could be wrong, world champion who's now in the twilight of his career and isn't quite what he once was. He's good at spoiling and making fights awkward, but he doesn't have that same thing. In this fight, we saw Ryan Garcia, a younger fighter, more explosive fighter, just have the attributes that Barrios was not able to compete with. You could instill a game plan, but whether the game plan works or not is kind of up to variables that are out of coach's hands. How well does he take punches? How can he handle the blinding hand speed? How does he handle the beginning rounds? I think most people thought Garcia would win the first 4 rounds. If you were banking on Barrios having success, you were banking on him taking over in the second half of the fight and dominating. What we ended up seeing was kind of a vintage Ryan Garcia performance. Very stunning and spectacular to start the fight, and then he just slows down in that second half, and that's always going to be the fear, is the explosive and the speed of Ryan Garcia. It might not be sustainable for a full fight. Now he's back with his father, Henry Garcia, fine enough trainer, but until you get to, and this is where I go back to the Frank Martin, Nahir Albright, till you get to a fight where it's 2 very comparable fighters. Not to say Barrios isn't comparable, but there were athletic gifts he didn't have in this fight, right? Even though he's a world champion, Garcia had some advantage athletically over Barrios until he meets someone like a Haney, like a Shakur Stevenson, all these interesting names that you're going to hear him be talked about with Ryan Garcia. And rightfully so. He's a star, and now he has a belt, and he's accomplished. He can forever say he was a world champion, etc. That's when you need a bit of a strategy. And for me, what this really stood out is boxing up until really 50-50 fights, and even then, it might not even be that. A big part of coaching is the preparation, right? But some of that is the motivations of the fighters, because you could have the best preparation, the best work, and all of that, but the fighter has to be enthused. And you have to have someone that's able to make adjustments on the fly and has to have good enough hand-eye coordination to just dominate certain level of opponents no matter what's happening. Do we just overvalue the role of the boxing coach because as a boxing fan, we want to be the smartest guy in the room? And sometimes there's like a voyeuristic experience being like, I'd like to be that smart guy that takes a fighter on this journey and only I understand what it is. I think now that's like becoming the betting person, watch me make bets or whatever, watch me predict fights, look at how much I know. Boxing, probably more than any other sport, is kind of a know-it-all sport where like people have to be right. You rarely hear people go, man, I was wrong. It's like, I knew it. Listen to most people, I was so on this, I knew this. And it's like the only sport where people want a cookie for like being an expert and getting an opinion right. Every other thing that is just required, you cover the news, you cover the NBA, you're required to like have expertise, but just be an expert and be solid with it. In boxing, people want praise for actually knowing what they're talking about, which kind of tells you something, right? And I was sitting there and watching, and it just felt like when you watch Barrios at this stage in his career, there were just things he couldn't do against Garcia. And if Garcia came in the best he did, which he was, more than likely he wins just because of athletic advantages and where he's at in his career. And it really does, like the whole build-up, trader, Joe Goosen used to train Ryan Garcia, whatever. What really could you do in that situation, right? What can you do? Maybe you could do subtle things, right? You could try to have him target the body or try to punch with him or try to set feints and walk him into something. But the coach isn't taking the punches. And it's very difficult to believe different outcomes could come when you have an elite fighter like Barrios. And I know some people giggle and go, oh, is he elite? Yeah, he won a world title. He's elite. I've been around him. He's a very, very good fighter. So my question leaving this is, at a certain point, like, what's the tier where boxing coaches matter? Like, where they really, really matter, where they're X's and O's? Because to me, this wasn't a boxing coach fight. This was a talented, up-and-comer emerging into a champion in Garcia, beating an older veteran who had a belt, and nothing about it was strategy. It was more so the traits they bring into the ring and where they were at in the careers.